How is it one can pray effectively during times of suffering?
Yeah, I think the main point about prayers during times of suffering is to make them very short and very to the point. And we call those spontaneous prayers. And those spontaneous prayers really shouldn't be very long at all. Something very easy to remember, something that gets right to the point with God, where we're connecting with God through and in our suffering, where all of a sudden God's grace can be conduited through that prayer into our hearts. So I recommend prayers. There's one very important prayer. It kind of goes like this: help! And of course, does God listen to that prayer? Of course He listens to that prayer. Another prayer that I think Catholics know exceedingly well, it brings in the whole consolation of the Blessed Virgin Mary. Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee. And of course, just even the first part of that, or just Holy Mary, Mother of God, pray for us sinners, now and at the hour of our death. That Hail Mary is just such an important conduit, to grace and even her motherly presence and the home that we feel in God. There's a real consolation there in that prayer. Another prayer that I like to use is, I give up, you take care of it. This is a prayer that, sometimes we're just trying to control everything in our lives, and it's just not controllable. Something's going on over here, something going on over there, right? Everything's kind of falling apart, and the middle will not hold. And so finally, of course, I just use that prayer: Lord, I give up. I'm going to put it all in your lap. You take care of it. This is not a prayer of despondency, right? You're giving it to God, which is exactly what we need to do. I've got stories about all of these prayers and why they work. Another one I just have and use frequently is Lord, snatch victory from the jaws of defeat. Really important prayer. Another one that, again, just centers things: Lord, don't waste one bit of this suffering. Make some good come out of it for me, for other people around me, for your church, for salvation, but make optimal good come out of my suffering. Optimal good for the world, for others, for myself. But don't waste anything. Make optimal resurrection come out of this cross. So that's another one. I have just a few more that I would suggest, and then I'll give a website that'll help you to get all these prayers again, so you don't have to sort of take notes. But one of them is, Lord, just push back the foreboding. Sometimes we're almost kind of surrounded by what we feel to be a kind of a negativity, or a kind of evil, or a kind of foreboding or darkness. And I just say that prayer. I use my hands with it too. I just say, Lord, just push back this foreboding. Just push it back. And if I pray that enough times, very fervently, the foreboding really does push back. It really does work. I also use the prayer of Jesus in the Garden of Gethsemane, which I think is so important. And of course, that's, Father, if it be your will, then take this cup away from me. But if not, then thy will be done. So in other words, the idea for Jesus is, this is the cup of suffering, right? So the idea of, take this cup from me is the cup of suffering from me. Take this suffering away from me. Don't let me, undergo this suffering. But if it's your will, if this is going to do some good for salvation, for the world, something is going to happen, then, as it in Jesus's case, then thy will be done. And we have to just remember God's will is very much His loving will. And that leads, to a final prayer, thy loving will be done. And this prayer is so important. I say it 30 times a day. You can say it in times of fear. You can say it in times of anger or impatience. You can say it in times of temptation. You can say it in times of just, when your arrogance or something is getting out of control, as mine does. And, it's just getting God into the picture right away. But especially in times of suffering, thy loving will be done. Of course, we have to remember that prayer can only be said in faith. We have to believe that God's will for us is to optimize love, optimize goodness, and optimize salvation, right? So if that's God's will for us, to optimize goodness and love and salvation, then we can say this prayer so effectively effectively, because we know that we'll become a conduit of God's grace, and it's going to be very, very effective. I say it this way: thy loving will be done, because that reminds me of the fact that his love is to optimize salvation, goodness, and love through us. So those are some prayers. You know, there are many other ones that I have on a website.
Yeah, what's the website?
If you go to magiscenter.com.
Okay.
Yeah, just go to magiscenter.com, the one you mentioned at the beginning of the program, and go to the second landing page, which is called Faith and Suffering. And right there in the free resources, you'll see an article that's called Getting Started on Prayer. I would just read that. You could also get it too in some of my books, but the 5 Pillars of the Spiritual Life. But I just read that free article, Getting Started on Prayer, and that'll remind you of that and of previous episodes too. Who is God? What we did last week. It's right there on that same second landing page called Happiness and
That's
Suffering.
the magiscenter.com. We got it up on the screen.